thank you all for attending the Master Plan Steering Committee meeting on July 26th at 7 p.m. Thank you for attending on a hot summer day. I want to thank Judy and Anna and Tyler and
Martha.
Thank you. Just everyone, before we start, Judy, why don't you introduce the other members that were working on the project for you then?
Yeah, so I thought it might be helpful to folks if you had some other voices besides mine tonight. So with us, we have Tyler Marin, who worked on the land use and housing sections of the inventory and assessment. Martha, who worked on the historic and cultural resources piece, and Anna, whose firm worked on the transportation section. So just to kind of have some additional voices in the conversation, if it's helpful to you folks, because these were not all my ideas by any stretch of the imagination. So
yeah, no, and we thank you, and we thank each of you for joining us and giving your input. So I just want to do first an official attendance, just to have that on the record. So Dean.
Here.
Ashley's not here, right? Carrie?
Here.
Andrew?
Here.
Janet?
Ashley.
Okay, oh, yeah. And Ashley? Okay, I'll give her a second. John?
Here.
And Glenn said he wasn't going to be able to attend. Mike?
Here.
And Danelle is not here yet. And Katie? Here? Yeah, I know she's looking for the audio.
Here.
Switch. And myself here. And Mike, thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, and Jen, I'm sorry. How did I miss you? Yeah, thank you. Sorry, you're on my list, but I went right by you. Thank you. So we have 10 out of our 12 members attending. That's really,
That's very good.
very nice attendance.
I'm here as well. Thank
Oh,
you.
hi, Ashley. Yes, I'm sorry. I acknowledged you while you were still getting on. So you just acknowledge that you're here. Thank you. So the main purpose of tonight's meeting is to go through the different recommendations that Judy and her team has come up with for each of the 10 goals. And I'll let Judy speak more about this in a minute. But the purpose of that is to give her a sense of what kinds of actions with the committee, what kind of things are we looking for? We would be accepting or not. It would give them a better sense as they go forward and flesh out the recommendations they're going to be adding to them, to give a sense of what might be that we would be willing to entertain. So I thought to the process that we would use to go through this was not to do official votes, just to make this more of a straw vote, if everyone's good with that. I was going to call on I was first going to call on Judy or a member of her team for each of the goal areas to go through and give a little description of the 3 or 4 recommendations. And then I was going to, John, you may need to mute. Yeah, you may need to mute one of your.
I did.
Yeah, I think you're still on for both of them, so you're going to have feedback. I mean, if everybody mutes,
John.
If everybody mutes when they're not speaking, that's always the best.
Right.
So after Judy and or one of her and one of the members of her team gives a brief description, then I was going to go and call on each of you, and I'm going to change the order for each of the goals, and just give your sense of the 3 or 4 recommendations, saying very briefly what you like, or if you don't like some. Or if you wanted to, is there anything that you think should have been there? And again, looking for just a brief description or brief comments on that. So first, I just want to make sure, does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay, so that's the main part of our agenda. And I want to thank Patrick also for attending. And then also we're going to do a status update where we stand. Judy would do that, or Tyler, and then just look at the schedule, just that we may need some adjustments to the schedule for September and going through the rest of the year. So anyone have any questions before we start that process? So we'll start off with the first goal, which is economic development. And there were 4 recommendations. So Judy, do you want to describe each of the 4? Oops, you're muted too.
I will, but what I'm hoping is that everybody's had a chance to read these, because what we tried to do for each one was explain a little bit about what it means and why it's in there. And the why is the important part. So, I mean, I can just briefly say.
I think very briefly, I think, just to give it a little context for everyone.
So one is you have this rapid recovery plan, which has a lot of good content in it. That I just think when you're doing a master plan, if you know there's other planning work that's been done recently, you try to reinforce the recommendations in those plans by integrating them into the master plan. So there's quite a little good content there, but I think the principle here is really, you have this plan, you need to implement it. It doesn't help to do a plan and then not implement the recommendation. So there's quite a bit in there about infrastructure and beautification and just the sort of ambiance of downtown, that I think those recommendations in that plan are really good. What it doesn't do so much, and it's kind of honest about this, is get into the weeds about the zoning in downtown. And I think that really needs a look. Frankly, from my experience, we do a lot of zoning work in our firm, and I mean, the whole zoning bylaw needs to be updated. But I think in particular, the kind of central business district, the standards, the permitting process. I mean, it's not just sort of looking at use and dimensional regulations. It's also about how does permitting work. So, you can get help from MAPC. You don't necessarily have to hire a firm like ours or somebody else and pay out of your budget. You actually can just get the regional planning agencies help, and that's probably would be a good thing to do. So that's sort of in there to kind of supplement the rapid recovery plan recommendation. I've spent a fair amount of time just looking at the land use pattern and sort of the development pattern and the values and so forth in the industrial districts. And I think it would really make sense to have sort of an economic analysis done of those 2 zones. Having been a consultant to the Board of Appeals when the Summer Street project was going on, I think that there was a fair amount of frustration in the neighborhood. As you probably know, that property is all or partially in an industrial district. And I'm not sure that the zoning makes sense, that what's in that zone or those 2 zones. Somebody needs to really look at it from an economics point of view, what makes sense in these parts of town. So it's a little different recommendation from just do a zoning review. It's really sort of what is the market potential of these areas, what makes sense, and then are the regulations that apply in the industrial districts, are they up to snuff? Are they up to date? Are they relevant? Are they obsolete? This is one of the things that often happens with industrial zoning. In our experience, is that because the industries change, and sometimes the way of describing them in zoning is kind of obsolete. So, but I think first of all, you have to kind of understand what is sort of the good market potential of your industrial property and what's happening in your region, and how do you capture as much of that kind of development that is happening as you can. And then what are sort of the reuse market potentials of the property in those zones. And then the last economic development piece is really, it's sort of COVID related in a way. You have a home occupation bylaw that's a little bit archaic in that you have sort of 2 ways of describing what's allowed. One is the sort of the type of business that's allowed, that's by right, and it's sort of professional offices at home. And then you have businesses that might be a little more of an impact on a neighborhood, and you require a special permit from the Board of Appeals for those, but it's sort of implied what the difference is. The way we do home occupation zoning today, it's really just about impact. So a home occupation is allowed regardless of what kind of business it is, if there's no parking in the yard, if there's only one person working on the premises, it's sort of, that's kind of how you define it. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is. So I think just it'd be an easy thing to tweak, but the reality is that more people are working at home now. People who are telecommuting, they're in a different class. They're not like setting up a business. But what did happen during COVID that I think is really, fun and kind of interesting is that a lot of people did really start working at home more on a self-employed basis. So you just want to make sure from an economic development perspective that your zoning doesn't interfere with home-based businesses, and at the same time has those sort of impact standards that you would want to have to protect the character of a residential neighborhood. So those are kind of the 4 ideas. It's sort of how do you accommodate and encourage entrepreneurship and self-employment? How do you get the best kind of development you can in your industrial zones? How do you bring your downtown zoning into the 21st century? And you've got these other things besides zoning that need to be done in the downtown area, and you need to kind of make those a priority. So that's kind of what we were thinking about economic development.
Yeah, no, thank you, Judy. And I just want to make sure we're on sync on this, that there's no particular order in these as you give them. I just want to make sure that that's true. And that you're going to be adding more. So this is just, again, just the beginning.
Yeah, these are test ideas. We're trying to find out what your kind of tolerance range is for ideas, but the order of these, by the way, is exactly the way they are in the existing kind of goals document. So it's not an order of priority, it's just the way they fell. And the way they fell in order in that list that you worked on months back is just based on the relative importance of things in the survey and what people said at the first meeting. So, but they're not intended to kind of rank order here. We just have to have a way to refer to them. So goal 1 is economic development.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everybody was clear about that. So what I'm going to do is call on each of you and, make this very simple. If you're good with all of them, say so. If you're not good with some, let us know. And if you want to comment or have questions, please add that. And then I just want to, for the sake of the time, I ask you to be very direct. And if somebody's already spoken very similar to what you're thinking, you can refer back to that. And please stay on topic as much as you can. And I will keep track of time. So bear with me on that. So with that, and I'm going to change the order each time. So I'm going to start off with Dean on this one.
Yeah. Hey, folks. Great job putting this information together. I mean, a lot of cumulative effort here. So for the the economic things, I don't really have any comments. But I do have a question. So for the home work bylaw, I work from home a lot. Is it just for me, or is it people who like work out of their homes as a commercial business, as like their home is their business address?
So you regulate home occupations now, which means people who have a business that they're operating out of their home. And really all we're saying is that it just needs to be updated. It's an old bylaw. But if you're telecommuting because you work for somebody who's in some other location, that's a little bit different. That's not operating a business.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dean.
Goals are good.
Yeah, and Ashley?
No, yeah, I agree with Dean. Funnily enough, I wrote my master's thesis on home occupation zoning, so I'm happy to help out with
I
that.
didn't know that. That's funny. That's funny. I didn't know that.
You can add to when we'll be working more on this.
Pre-COVID, so I was ahead of the curve there.
So you're good with all of them, Ashley?
Yes, and I appreciate that they tie back to other plan documents.
And Carrie?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I like that we are putting a spotlight on the rapid recovery plan. I think as described, there is a lot in that plan that is very doable and creates an impact for low cost in a lot of cases. So I think that's important. And yes, I think I'm good with the other points as well.
Thank you. And Andrew?
Thank you, Judy and team. This is excellent. I'll be short. I like all 4 recommendations. I do have a comment on the 1.3 recommendation, which is something that stood out to me in your summary of it. You write, it may be that, and this is, by the way, the context is the Summer Street 40B. It said it may be that some or quite a bit of the land in these districts is not well suited for industry, namely the land, if I understand it correctly, in the limited manufacturing or industrial districts that was used in this comprehensive permit application. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. I don't remember. I have to go back. It's a scar in my memory of Walpole.
No.
It was a hard project for the board.
I know it was really hard. And by the way, I just want to tie something together about this. I believe Pat Deshane could speak to this better, but you got a letter from Philip DiMartino at the DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, dated June 22nd, Pat, about the SHI units that were supposed to be tied to this Summer Street project, the Cedar Crossing, Cedar Edge project. They got removed from our SHI, removing us from safe harbor. Is that a fair summary, Pat?
That's a clear summary, I'd say. I mean, it's kind of a unique situation, obviously. But that letter was sent from DHCD to us on June 22nd, basically referring back to Cedar Edge, Cedar Crossing. Being that there was no building permits pulled within a year, they were removing those units from our SHI.
So I just thought that would be, that's pretty relevant news for this whole committee, just to be aware of as we talk about land use regulation. We're going to talk about economic development right now, but I just want to flag that fact because in this recommendation 1.3, Judy, when you talk about, and I completely agree, part of the issue with a 40B like Summer Street was that we had poorly thought out some of these limited manufacturing industrial district zones. And so if there's fallow land that's not being used, and it's maybe miszoned for industrial archaic uses. And so just wanted to tie that together with the recent news about the SHI. So yeah, I'm good on all of these, really super strong. The Rapid Recovery Plan has excellent recommendations to really beautify downtown. I think that's an easy win when we look at the pedestrian improvements through Main Street and around Elm Street in downtown. Could really make the downtown more vibrant. That increases economic development potential. That increases commercial tax revenue. That's it for me.
Thank you, Andrew. And Janet?
I agree with all of the speakers before me. I think it's been very helpful to pull in the other available mechanisms for us to move ahead in this whole process. I think everything seems to me fine.
Thank you. And John?
Okay. Well, I could talk forever, but I won't.
No, just
basically, I'm the person that restarted the economic development as a commission, part of Walpole in 1980. It's 40 years ago. So I know quite a bit about this, but and I know all the history. That would just.
Oh, John, we lost you. John, is your sound better?
An economic development consultant dialogue, and it's okay. I think that I don't like to, in these types of scenarios, it's easy, particularly when we're working with consultants. Every other paragraph is we should engage another consultant. I think if later in the document, we're recommending total zoning revamp and rewrite and consulting. And I think that should suffice as opposed to having it redundantly repeated both for CBD here and done townwide for all districts and for all parts of planning. Other than that, I would say, again, the COVID, I'm a little taken aback how much contemporary COVID coloring there is to most of the language here. I'm not sure that RRP has any significance really in long term about the economics and the businesses. We didn't mention here Route 1 at all. It didn't mention the business park on Main Street.
Oops, we lost you again, John. John?
Infrastructure
Yeah,
and
so John, just so you know, we didn't hear everything you said. I don't know whether your other computer has better audio or, but you have to turn that one, the one you're on off, just have one on. Yeah, no, now we have none.
I was mentioning that the Walpole Mall area was not included
Oops.
in Route 1.
Actually, maybe you should go back to the first one. That's not working at all. You're getting a lot of feedback on that one. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. Is everybody else hearing that feedback?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can hear him though.
Yeah.
Enough. Okay.
So I mentioned about Route 1, Walpole Mall,
Mhm.
other areas that are significant for economic development. There's many other things I could bring up, but the COVID doesn't really interest me. I think that's just a flavor of the month type of thing.
So John, so in summary, are you in favor of the 4 with some reservations? And you'd like to see something about Route 1?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Oh,
the
yeah.
opportunity
Yeah.
is really to,
And again, I think as Judy said at the beginning, this doesn't mean this is there's going to be more added, but it's good input to give her. So certainly that's good to have.
well, RRP, I don't think everybody even knows about that. I mean, I don't know how that's a dominant feature.
Knows about what?
RRP, RPP, RRP.
Oh, okay, yeah, so you're in favor of that.
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay, so you're not in favor of that, but you're in favor of the others?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Jen, I won't forget you this time.
That's quite all right. I just wanted to say first, I agree with all the goals. I wanted to thank Judy and everyone for writing these in plain English. For people who are not familiar with the nitty gritty of all these, so they can understand. I felt that was really helpful. I will be honest, in true procrastinator fashion, I read them on the train going home. So whenever it becomes our final one, if it references another plan, it would be helpful if it had a hyperlink, just so if whenever it's on the website has that. And then building on what John said, like if we can have economies of scale, if we do have people, I like the idea of a suggestion of having an independent audit throughout some of these, because again, as someone who's not an expert in some of these things, I will go to these meetings and like the public hearing of the planning board, and I'll hear, side A say this, side B, and like each person, I'm like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. That sounds, so there's a lot of competing priorities. So I see the need for having someone who can help us weigh those competing interests and figure out a way forward. But again, thank you for the work. I think it's good. I think they're all good.
So having the consultants is good, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mike?
I think they look great too. I don't have anything to add that's not already been said. They look really good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Katie?
So for the most part, I agree. And it's not that I disagree with this one, but with number 2, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, it's not that I disagree. It's just the name made me pause. It's great to gather input and ideas, but the name Metropolitan refers to a larger, more urban setting that we are not. So we want to flourish, we want to improve who we are, but not become someone else. So just, I think we should just take that into account when considering their input. I'm not saying their input would be bad. I just think we need to make sure that it really applies to our community. That's it.
Okay, and thank you. And Judy, but we are part of that planning area, right?
Yeah.
So we're not the only town in the, you know, that is a town that's part of that, right?
Right. Oh, no, you're not. But I mean, you know, to Katie's point, it's like if you don't deal in that world, it may sound like it's an entity that's sort of going to come with an agenda. And the reason I mentioned MAPC here was simply to try to convey the point that you don't have to pay consultants all the time to do some of this work, that the advantage to using the regional planning agency is that you can usually get them inexpensively, if not for free, through what's called district local technical assistance. So that was why that was in there, Katie.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to it. I just think we have to, you know, see what they come back with and if it,
sure,
how it applies to us.
Yep, agreed. Nope, that's perfectly fine.
A lot of the studies out there seem to apply to bigger settings than us. And when you're trying, and again, that's not a bad thing. I think you just have to conform it to the different community. Do you know what I mean? Take what can fit and what doesn't, you know, just weigh it all. That's all.
Yep, agreed.
And thank you, Katie. And for myself, I agree with all of them. The only other comment I had was in the first one on the, oh, sorry, no, the limited manufacturing, the third one, is that this may be often the conservation one, or the sustainability. We have our photovoltaic overlay district. And I think we really need to do a lot better of saying, instead of being, we always wait till a developer comes and says we want to put a solar field here. I think we need to be much more intentional. Where do we want solar fields, and have some guidance out there? So I don't know where that would belong, but because you mentioned the limited manufacturing and the industrial districts, I just want to mention that.
Okay, thank you.
But I also want to echo everyone else. Very, very good job and very clear, and I think it's really very helpful in guiding us on that. So for goal 2.
So these are the.
Oh, and yes, please go ahead with the summary.
So these are ideas that we had come up with for open space and recreation. Fiona, who you've all kind of seen at other meetings, worked on this section, and unfortunately she's still in Ireland, so she's not with us tonight. But I think the point that she was trying to make in these and some other ideas that I did not include in this packet is around, first of all, you know, the idea of equity. If you're going to have recreational spaces, it's important to make sure that everybody can use them. So thinking about accessible design is just really important. Not all of your spaces are accessible, and it would be important to kind of make that a priority. The idea about the sort of recreation department and recreation committee is really just sort of getting coordination and communication better than it seems to be at this point. And I'm welcome to, you know, hear back from you guys if maybe we're either overreacting to that or not understanding it, but it's sort of our sense that you know, some improved communication and better utilization, or utilization, I guess, and of volunteers would be enhanced if those groups were communicating better. And then, you know, the third one was just kind of this idea of a sort of a recreation center integrating those different facilities. So those were the ideas that came to mind to us as kind of important. And there are others that I just pulled out because I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to put too many in here again on any of these until we got some ideas. But accessibility, you know, coordination, communication, optimal use of and encouragement of volunteers, and then, you know, the idea of sort of this integrated facility of passive and active recreation. Those were kind of the themes, if you will. So any thoughts on these would be great.
Okay, I'm going to start with, and by the way, thank you. I'll start with Ashley on this one.
I'm sorry, lower, I'm on my phone, keep in and out.
Oops, I didn't catch that.
I didn't either. I think she's having some connection problems.
Okay, Ashley, why don't we come back to you? And we'll go with Carrie.
Sure. I definitely agree with the first statement. For the second one, I think I'm probably a little bit ignorant about what the coordination is right now between the rec department and the rec committee, and Mike can probably speak to that a little bit more for us. I just have a question because I feel as though in our conversations with the community about open space and recreation, as well as with natural resources, over and over again, some of the facilities that were brought up were the town forest, Bird Park, and Adams Farm.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering why they're not here represented in the goals, whether that's because we feel as though, you know, the management of those is kind of on track and we don't need to do anything very specific in the near future, or what the case might be there.
It was simply a question of paring them back, Carrie. It wasn't anything else, because actually there were some Adams Farm. There was at least one Adams Farm recommendation in the mix, and I just had to make a judgment call what we were going to put in front of you. But yeah, that's there at least is one recommendation about that. And you know, just management of facilities and organization and coordination, I think, is sort of a theme throughout the other ones that aren't here too.
Okay, so
But
I
also
wonder,
making people aware of what exists as well.
right. So I wonder then, and this is not something we have to discuss in great detail right now, but if we're talking about greater coordination specifically with rec department and rec committee, whether we might need to include other town committees like the trails committee, the town forest committee, et cetera, just to sort of make it a little bit more comprehensive.
Sure.
Again, just putting that out there right now, not something we need to go into detail on. And other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so Carrie, thank you very much. And you might have seen, but Ashley is having trouble with her computer, but she agrees with what Carrie said, and I think that extends to your comments, Carrie, on the open space, as well as what the point you just raised about including other committees with 2.2. If I got that right. So thank you. And Andrew.
Number one is great, fully in support. Same for number two, but I'm just going to come back to something in 2.2, because number three, it's really smart. I agree with it. So I agree with all of them, but I feel like you could state your recommendation a little more clearly. 2.3 says enhance Blackburn, Stone, Morgan, and the pool to be an integrated passive and active recreation facility near downtown Walpole. And so when I just read in 2.2 how there's a lack of interior programming space for the recreation department, if I understand this correctly, and people on the rec committee, Mike and others who know more about this can correct me, but if the whole point is, hey, we need to have this passive and active facility in downtown Walpole, you say use the word enhance Blackburn, Stone, and Morgan, but could we say maybe something more strongly like consider building an indoor recreation facility on the plot in downtown Walpole where Blackburn, Stone, and Morgan are?
I'm not responding. I'm just taking notes here right now. I mean, yes, I mean, certainly we could.
All three are great. That's it.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to let Judy catch up on that.
It's okay. No, keep going. It's fine.
Okay. And Janet?
They were certainly inclusive, but a lot of them I think are involving things that I don't know if they're practical. The trying to get all the committees to meet to determine goals and direction might be more of a pie in the sky than we're able to do. We can recommend certainly whatever, but I don't know if that would be practical. The same with suggesting that we build, I think enhance is a wonderful term. I think it also is might be a little bit without ground. So I agree with Andrew's idea that we should have something maybe more specific to throw in there,
Okay.
but I don't know whether or not building would meet the needs of the town at this point. But they're all very interesting and good.
Thank you.
And John?
Yeah, I would say, again, it seems like, the ADA is right at the top there. That's obviously important. I take a handicapped child out every day, and I know there's no handicapped playgrounds in Walpole, et cetera. But I think looking at this, two things. I agree with Carrie said about some extremely valuable resources. Number one, Adams Farm, that was a $20 million investment, 400 acres, totally underutilized. Bird Park, tremendous resource, groomed daily by trustees of reservation and maintained impeccably, totally underutilized. Jarvis Farm, not organized to be utilized the way it should. So those are big recreation pieces. But a broader point is, I didn't hear the public, it wasn't asking for an indoor recreation facility. I didn't hear some of these things from the public. These are things that people maybe have their own ideas about, spending money and so forth. But I would just say that coordination, everything doesn't have to be coordinated. I'll give you examples. Little League Baseball, I ran the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts for years. There's a hockey program. There's all kinds of recreation programs that have nothing to do with the town of Walpole, and they run just fine with volunteers. The town doesn't have to own and operate and pay for everything. And some people just try to put everything in a big ball of wax. And I kind of object to that. I think that there's plenty of room here for a lot of these things to take care of themselves. We don't have to be the nanny state on every recreational activity that the public might want. What I would say is, if you want to look at something, how do we get better integration for the use? Bird Park has bandstand facilities for music, for art. They have art. They try to establish art programs over there. And I know, Phil, you know that because you yourself were involved in organizing an art program in Bird Park, and you did a wonderful job of that. They're very commendable. People are still talking about it. In fact, they wonder if they can do it again after the pandemic. But these three areas I would really like to focus on, and I'll bring it up later because I don't know whether it goes under land use or not. But I think one of my deals is not just working with Bird Park more closely, but I'm, as chairman of the Sewer and Water Commission, I've undertaken a project to integrate Jarvis Farm more into the recreational loop, which hasn't been done and hasn't been really defined. And there's a lot of issues there. But Adams Farm.
John, we lost you at a key point, I think. I'm not sure where you were going with that.
Into Bird Park from the community to bring walking paths into the park, sidewalks into Bird Park, a driveway into Bird Park, and a better parking lot. So people from Walpole I'm not to Bird Park, to Adams Farm. People in Walpole can use Adams Farm. When I go up to Adams Farm, I meet dog walkers from Westwood and Norwood and people in the gardens from Jamaica Plain and Dedham. But I don't see the kids, the families from Walpole can't even get in there. It's inaccessible transportation wise. For a $20 million project, I think that is such a hole. And when you talk about open space and recreation, that's like the biggest issue anybody should ever take on if you want to talk about this topic. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and as I know there's in the chat, Ashley raised the question and Patrick answered it, but Bird Park is owned by the trustees of the reservation, so it's not a town-owned facility. Not to say that we couldn't be coordinated with what the town is doing, but it's not part of the town property or one of the town resources. Okay, thank you, John. So John, so it sounds like you you like the first one, but maybe not the other two. Is that what I was getting?
No, I don't, I'm not going exclusively on your dialogue here in this. I'm giving items that should be added instead of whatever. I don't care what you add or subtract,
Yeah,
but I think coordinating with Bird Park, making Adams Farm accessible as a fiscal responsibility after spending $20 million on it, and helping to get Jarvis Farm mainline far as recreation and open space use as well.
okay,
So I want
thank you.
those added. I'm not, I'm not going to say I'm against any of these others. It's just that I don't think they're of a high priority.
Okay,
And that's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, and Jennifer?
Yep, I agree with the first one for sure. All you have to do is look at the Stone Street playground and how busy it is. I've never seen so many kids, and I go by almost every day. So I love that accessible playground. As someone who, I would say that 2 is needed when it comes to at least the things that are run by the rec department, the programs. As someone who's been I feel like I'm in a long running program that keeps getting sort of shunted to the side, and there's a lack of communication. So I do think there's communication there. I like the idea of looking at Blackburn in that area. I wouldn't personally support changing that word to build right now. I think it can be one of a list of suggestions, but I also think it can tie into some of the other ones we're going to talk about later on. For instance, what the historical resources says, talk about our history. Like we could make a walking trail through there that talks about different parts of, Walpole history from, the original indigenous population to, the industrial age to now, to this, to the fauna, to the flora, to different things like that. So I think that could be something that could be added or tied in with another, to tie in 2 together, not to cross contaminate, but just a thought.
Okay, thank you. And Mike?
So I love the first one. I think that's super important. Down to number 3, I feel like this whole piece though doesn't tie in as nicely with the survey results and stuff that we had seen. And it goes back to John's point about Adams Farm. I mean, there was clear responses that talk about enhancing, the passive recreation areas. There was a lot of talk about Adams Farm. A big portion was kind of reducing the cutting back of trees and preserving green space.
Yeah.
And that's not here. So I would like to see that stuff kind of tied back in here.
Okay.
I think the Blackburn Stone, I mean, that was something that I've always talked about, and I think I'm happy to see it there. And I don't think that build is probably the right thing to put in front of the town of Walpole right now. But I do think a cohesive space that would attract people downtown and perhaps encourage foot traffic, come down and swim and then go for lunch or whatever it might be. I think that's really important. For the second piece, I don't know that I understand the intent. So the recreation department, the members of the recreation department meet with the recreation committee. It was on a monthly basis up until mid-COVID, and then we scaled back to a quarterly basis. Oftentimes that includes meeting, folks from, there's a public forum at every one of those meetings if people want to come. There's also a regular meeting with the people that maintain the grounds and the fields. We meet with the boosters on a regular basis and get feedback. We've also, got a lot of different programs that can help. Our Smiling Eyes program helps to fund the rec programs for folks that can't afford it, and we get recommendations from that program from the schools and from the schools, from the churches, so on and so forth. So we're reaching out to a lot of people there. I guess the point is communication can always be better, but I just want to make sure that this group knows that there is communication going on and that we have regular meetings. And I think to increase that and maybe pull some more parents in, I mean, that's important. And but maybe reword that, because I think it's saying that we're not talking, and we are talking.
And that's helpful to know. I mean, sometimes we hear things and because we're not there, you're trying to contextualize what's being said. But we may have sort of over responded to what was heard.
Yeah, I think that's got to either come out or
okay,
say
or
something
be
different.
reworked.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that's helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Yep.
And Katie?
So I think number one's good. I think number two, Mike spoke to, and he knows better than the rest of us.
Mhm.
Number three, I think is good. I do think that, and Janet might be able to back me up on this one. We have to be careful about, I think, meshing that area. We definitely could improve it. We could improve walkability and all of that. But I think when you say building, we have to be careful because recently there was a situation where the food pantry had inquired about the piece of property behind the pool and behind the field. And everyone agreed that the food pantry is a fantastic organization. But what surprised me was the number of people that attended the selectmen's meeting to speak out against developing anything in that area. They actually cited the master plan meetings and how they had been at them and how open space was so important and that they wanted everything preserved.
Mhm.
And to Carrie's point, I think that adding in those other areas, they mentioned, it was really enlightening to me to sit there, and I was there as a neighbor, and to hear people come that had no, it wouldn't impact them directly on a daily basis. And different ages, all different opinions, but they all seem to agree that that area was fantastic, had a lot to offer, and could be improved, but shouldn't necessarily be built up. And in addition to that, they mentioned the master plan, and they mentioned attending meetings, and they mentioned the open space in town and how they had moved here from other places. And they said the places because of what we had to offer in that respect. So I think it's important. This is definitely an important goal.
Thank you.
Katie?
Yes.
And- Yeah, and Dean?
Yeah, I think the goals are okay. Based on what the folks were saying prior, in your prior discussion, I agree that the meetings maybe isn't the highest priority. And I have to agree with John that I think what I've seen in the meetings and from the people is that maybe a more focus on what we do have, and
Mhm.
rather than starting new endeavors, it would probably be best to fully utilize what we have because we have so much. So I don't know if the team, our government in our town can support additional. I don't think that's additional open space and recreation. I think the focus should really be maintaining, improving, and making it better access, making it higher utilized, making people aware, holding events at these places that we have is probably a better priority than building new or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. So I support the first one, and I think that also maybe gets in some of the things that John was talking about, the accessibility. Certainly, I think if you're looking to make Adams Fire more accessible, I think that could be covered under 2.1 in a way. The quality meetings, I would defer to Mike on that. I think though, having meetings with more of the groups in town that are involved in the same things, that's always, I think that is always good to have better communications and better coordination. As far as enhancing Blackburn, I have to say, I always thought Blackburn was a building that needed a purpose. I don't think it's really a very good recreational building. I think it's a good, I spent a lot of time in there with Boy Scout, Cub Scout meetings, and the acoustics are very poor. So I think, and I know it's used for a lot of things right now, but I think having I think one of the things that mentioned here, an integrated, well-planned facility. So maybe having an integrated plan, understanding what we want to use it for. It's an historic building, and it may be used somewhat for recreation, but I think that would be a good thing to take a look at. And as I know, there's a concern about not saying build, but maybe it starts having a plan first and then determine the best way to get there, whether it means some buildings, some enhancements, some repurposing, but having a plan, I think, is would allow the different options be put out there. And then I just want to speak very briefly about I know about the food pantry, Katie, that you were talking about. And I know there's been a lot of talk about that. I think it's very important to make sure that people really understand what they're trying to do. And I'm not going to be the one to present that here tonight, but I do think that's very important. And maybe there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people are very quick to jump to conclusions. So I just urge anybody who is interested to make sure that they're getting the full plan and understanding what the trade-offs are.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because you weren't at that meeting, but
I was not.
again, I think Janet could back me up on this, but every single person present endorsed the food pantry in every way. They thought it was a great organization. There was nothing negative against the food pantry. Just to make that clear, it was just a situation of, it was a good idea to help them find a place, and most people present did not agree that was the place for them. It was a situation of everyone wanted to help them and support them. So it was nothing about misunderstanding them and nothing negative. I think it was very positive. Everyone agreed that they do great work. They are a great asset to the community. It was just a situation of, they were inquiring about different areas and trying to find a place to have a permanent residence for them to work out of. So no, there was nothing negative, I don't think, or misunderstood in any way. I thought it was all very positive and everyone supported them.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that's what feedback I got, but that's I think a different discussion. So
Yep.
I would just have to ask Phil, what, I know this isn't the proper platform.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested in knowing what you thought was the misinformation.
I understand that might be better just to have a personal conversation, Janet, because I don't want to make this, get sidetracked.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
Wait
so,
on it. Yep.
but since Katie brought it up, I just thought it was important to say that there may be more that people should really, I would suggest, finding out more about it before making a quick judgment. That's what I would appeal to. So I'm going to go to goal 3. And Judy, if you want to.
Sure. So again, this was one of those topics where I left out a lot just to keep it a manageable topic. But the 3 ideas here are pond management, which is an issue in a lot of the towns that we've worked in over time. It's just an adequate plan in place for pond management and the equipment and so forth to do that. Brownfields being a kind of priority for planning and kind of directing investment, given that reusing brownfields is often a great way to sort of couple with protecting open space somewhere else, is directing development where you've already got disturbed sites. And then the third piece, of course, is around the protection of the town's drinking water supplies, which I know the town already does. I think the plan just needs to kind of emphasize how important that is, especially if you're trying to think about identifying areas of the community where you really don't want to see a lot of additional development take place. The counterpart of that is, so where can development go, and where does it make sense to sort of direct development? Well, part of the reason you do that is to protect the places where you have these natural assets that really have a public health and safety importance in the community, which is the drinking water supply. So that's kind of why this is in here, to reinforce the importance of protecting the town's water supplies, and periodically looking at your existing regulatory scheme and conservation and septic systems and so forth, and make sure those things are up to sort of state of the art.
And anything else on the others, or?
I mean, I think this is
That's
these are the
okay.
three themes. if you will.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'll start with Carrie.
Sure. I don't have any dispute with what's here. I think in particular 3.3 is very important. Our management of our water system has been, a topic of public conversation recently, and I think, there's definitely a big interest in making sure that our infrastructure is sound and safe. And then the only other comment I would make, I guess, is whether it goes in open space or recreation, it sounds based on the conversation the last go around that acknowledging the importance of the natural resources that we have. It's not just the open space, but it's
Right.
the natural resources of the town forest and Adams Farm and some of these properties. I think it's just important to acknowledge that we want to preserve and maintain the natural resources in those areas.
And thank you, Carrie. And Andrew?
I support all three of these. I defer to Dean or someone who knows more about this than I do, but they all sound good to me.
Thank you. And Janet?
I also find 1 and 2 very interesting. I have a little bit of concern about number 3 because I think we have a very good protective sewer and water commission, my husband being one, that is quite involved in making sure we maintain purity and financially fiscal ideas so that we can be absolutely certain that we have good water. And that's most of the commissioner's only concern is to make sure the water is good. And I think that sums it. So, thank you.
But you support number 3 then?
I do, but I think you can't overemphasize that we need to watch to make sure. I think we do have a very good watchdog system already in place for the water. And I think they are continually, and John also would know, continually monitoring the purity, shut down anything that even has the slightest bit of contamination, as well as maintaining reasonable prices for the community to do all of this.
So you look at the committee as that watchdog is what the sewer and water commission.
Correct. And the water department.
And the water department. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And John?
Yeah, I don't want to say too much here other than I don't know whether the water resources should be discussed here in the resource section, but I would add to this only there is politics, unfortunately, that are entwined with this. And I would say during COVID, the commission kept water rate increases at 2.5% in deference to the people who were out of work and displaced in businesses that were shut down, et cetera.
Mhm.
And people took an opportunity to criticize us that we were not being physically responsible in building up a war chest for future infrastructure projects, which isn't true. And what I find a dilemma right now, and I don't know if this has to be in the report, but
Uh-oh, I think we lost John at a very important point, part of his point. So John?
In a drought, and some people's orange lawns are not looking too good, and that's unfortunate. Our water system is scaled to a certain amount of business, and between this population and 30,000 population, we're fine with the amount of water we can produce at a high quality. But beyond that, when you have a lot of economic development in here, we have several of the members have pushed for years to persuade the community to have a supplemental water service with the MWRA so that we never run short or have a situation like we have right at this moment. And it's not to either or to substitute wall-to-wall water, but it's to have a fail-safe system and a secure system. If there is a contaminant or something happens, that everything will go on perfectly and no one will be put at a public health risk or any other side of economic injury because of it. And people don't understand that for some reason. They think we're trying to walk away from our Walpole water system, and we're not. But, you know, in fact, an example, right today, the MDRA is pumping millions of gallons of water into the ocean unused. And here we are on water telling people they can't water their lawns except one day a week. So at someday, I think we'll get to that point, but that has nothing to do with the water. The real issue is, because the people in this committee are sort of town insiders, I do want to make a point to you that there's ARPA funds that were given by the state for infrastructure for the communities as a result of the economic situations we've had for the last few years. And it's for infrastructure, and we have projects that can all be undertaken under that. And sometimes in politics, people have hired a consultant to interpret certain painting rooms in the school and other things as being infrastructure improvements and taking their funds away from the water proposals that we've made. And, you know, politicians will have their way because they're in charge. But
So, John, I'm not sure that-
we're trying to argue to get a reasonable portion of that so we can put new filters in and really have first-class water. And we've won awards and trophies the last 3 years for the quality of our program. So there's not a lack of diligence in having the best quality water. But just to explain, if people from the outside think there's something wrong, the question is, we'd like to do more of the infrastructure if we can get more of these funds. If we can't, we have a program, and as we've continued to do, we'll operate it successfully. But people need to think about, if you're investing in the future of Walpole, a supplemental service with the MDRA before it's too late might be a very wise thing, because then you wouldn't be held back if the town opens a new industrial park or takes some of these recommendations for more expansion with the CBD and more housing, et cetera, that you folks have talked about. And that'll blend in nicely with those growth factors that seem to be in this report.
Okay, no, that's a good point to make. But are you supportive of the three things other than what your comments you made then? I mean, I think, you know, like 3 out of 3, no one's saying the water, you know, our commissioners aren't doing a good job. It's just saying protect the town's high quality, high yield aquifers, you know, so I think.
John, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
All these are important, and I think that, you know, the protecting the ponds as well as the brownfields and the union privilege, that is obviously very important to monitor and keep track of that. And I support, obviously, we have very good zones and protections for our recharge and for our drinking water, and we have a good system. So hopefully that'll be carried into the future with the next, you know, people who are in charge of it.
Okay, thank you. And Jen?
I'm fine with all 3, and because we're only on goal 3 and we do this for an hour, I have no further comments.
Okay, so if we want to make this go a little faster, I think, let's go through this first, and I'm going to come back to that. Glenn is not here. Mike?
So I think all 3 of these are really good, and I'm really happy to see point 2 there, because that's something that didn't really come through in any of our surveys. So it was really nice to see that, and it's something that we probably hadn't discussed before, and it's really important. I think the one thing I would like to add or see in there is we didn't really focus too much on the public education piece. Mm-hmm. And I think Carrie mentioned that briefly, but to collaborate with the schools and nonprofits and other town agencies to educate the town about what types of natural resources we have in the town forest and elsewhere. So that's all. Everything else was really good. Thanks.
Okay, and thank you. And Katie?
So I agree with these. I think they're all important, and I'll try, based on time constraints, not to go off on a tangent. But I think I can speak to number one specifically. I live on Memorial Pond. I've been here 27 years. And I could not agree more that we need a concrete plan for the ponds. Memorial Pond was a man-made pond that was a town land taking. That's how it was established originally. And it is deteriorating quickly. We hired a company to come in and do some work, and I believe we were fully misled. They only dug probably a third of the pond, the part that you see from Town Hall. And they dug down 12 feet instead of equally digging across the pond. So as a result, what you have is the water's not moving around, and it is not because of the drought. And it is deteriorating quickly and growing up very quickly, and we're going to lose the pond. We'll keep that little portion that was dug, and that'll be it in the end, because the other day I saw a squirrel walking across the top of the pond. So that being said, the ponds are great in Walpole, and the number of animals that live on those ponds is, you wouldn't even believe what I see. And it is very important in my eyes that we preserve them.
Okay, thank you. And Dean?
Three. I think these are great. I think that the third one could be tied into the second one, in terms of all we'd have to do in number 3 is also talk about the potential for contamination from our listed sites impacting our groundwater, because that does happen, and it has happened, and it is happening. So I think that would be important to call out in that number 3. This, just tie in 3.2 to 3. I think that's very important. We say it here, oil and hazardous waste leakage. It would be interesting to put that a little lower too, lower in the paragraph.
Okay,
That's it.
Yeah.
thank you.
And Ashley, I know you may be having problems with your.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, great. So I just had one question. There's going to be a chapter that kind of digs into the existing conditions more specifically on these. Is that accurate?
Yeah, to the extent that we have the information, yes.
Okay, because I'm just like, there's some statements in like editing wise. I'm just wondering, like in 3.1, it says invasive plant species and pond sedimentation are significant threats to pond management. Is that what's impacting our ponds and Walpole? I guess I'm just wondering, like the conditions, and then like the 186 brownfields. I'm just curious in terms of where those are on a map, how big they are on average, those kinds of things.
Yep.
Okay, great. And then my other question is, are we going to be able to include like a glossary of terms to go with this? Because
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so typically what I would prefer to do, instead of making people constantly flip to a glossary, is that we would have, we identify terms that are not common knowledge, and we would define them in like a text box right on the same page where they appear, but they would also be highlighted, so to draw the reader to, this is a term we need you to know, and here's the definition of it.
Excellent.
So it's just it's just a better way to do it than to make people flip to a glossary all the time.
Okay. Those are my only comments, because I think some of this can be really technical.
Oh yeah,
Thank
they
you.
can. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. And I agree with all 3 as well. I'll make my comments very short. So I'll just let it go with that. I do agree with all 3. So 2 things real quick. One, Judy, so when we gave comments to the findings that you had written, we're still going to go through that process of seeing your how you edited everything, to see how you handled our comments, right? That's
Yes, we are. And we're also just trying to scale those documents back where they can be, so that they're not quite so, the information that's in them needs to be there.
Yeah.
The question is, can they be condensed in any way so that they're a little more reader friendly? But yeah, you will, of course. We'll be bringing those back.
Because that is part of the current state, that I think that you were talking about, Ashley, that we. And then I just want to, so I don't want to cut people short, because I think it's very important that everyone get a chance to speak, but it is, it is an hour into the meeting. So what I ask is to really, I think it's easy for us to talk about individual things or specific things and problems, but try to keep it at the higher scope, because when they're recommending something, it takes into account what we need to do at a broader level, and if there is a small problem we know about, that may not, it may be important to, in one sense, but I think for the level of what we're trying to do here and the recommendations, so just asking people to try to keep their comments brief, but I don't want anyone not to say something that's important. So if you bear with me, we're going to continue doing this, and I'll leave it up to you to just maybe see how we make this more efficient. So Judy, on goal 4, and again, I hope people had a chance to really read these. I think Judy and her team did a really good job in summarizing the different recommendations.
So, yeah, I can tell you where these are coming from and what the issues are. And Tyler, if you want to jump in at any point, that would be great. But one of the reasons you're going to see regulatory recommendations end up in more than one section of the plan is that in this context, the audit of the bylaw is not about a lot of substantive change as much as it is cleaning it up. Your bylaw needs work. It is an old bylaw. It's you spend any time reading it and you can kind of see. So what we're talking about here is what's called a zoning audit, where you literally do a close reading for clarity, consistency. Are there things that really kind of are out of sync because they're out of sync, or they've become that way over time, the way they've been rewritten, and nobody realizes it because some section isn't activated, and then all of a sudden someone comes up and wants approval for something, and people go, that's not in my bylaw, but it is. So it needs to be cleaned up. And frankly, it needs to be cleaned up before you try to start adopting a lot of more interesting things. There's nothing worse than adopting some new interesting zoning that might be very important from a policy perspective, only to have it conflict with something that's hidden in that bylaw that nobody knew was there because nobody's read it forever. So I think as a first order of business, we often make this recommendation, and I can tell you definitely in Walpole, it really needs to be done, in our opinion. The second recommendation in here is that I think you guys really need to give consideration to reinstating the town planner position, which is not Pat's job. Pat's job is a little different. But you're the only town kind of around you that doesn't have a town planner. And the role is very specifically around supporting the planning board and the other regulatory boards in terms of their cohesion, their work, the consistency of their decision-making process, how they function together. And I think even more importantly, because I know, Pat, you try to do some of this now, at least with the Board of Appeals, but it's really around long-range planning. That's the main value of having a town planner, is someone who's a professionally trained planner who can help your community with long-range planning stuff, so it doesn't wait for 20 years while you're going to update your master plan again. You have some long-range planning issues in your town that really kind of need to be looked at. And that to us is kind of a main reason to have a town planner. But I also think it's just to make sure that the planning board has the assistance it needs. I mean, again, it's not a comment about whether someone's doing their job. It's about making sure they have the resources they need to do their job. But I would just say in this context, the thing that we're the most concerned about is long-range planning. And that leads to the third item in here. I think we're all kind of feeling like, of all the things that are going to come at you, that you kind of need to be dealing with as a community, it's what's going to happen to that prison property when it closes. And so from our point of view, that's an important role for a planning board, to be involved very upfront in kind of working with state officials and others who are going to be involved in deciding what happens with that site, so that you make sure as it evolves into whatever use it's going to become, that it's consistent with the town's planning objectives and meets all the other concerns that your community has. If you think that your interests are going to be protected by a state agency figuring out how to dispose of that property, that is just, you can't make that, you can't rely on that. So we think this is like a huge issue that probably isn't all that much discussed in the drafts you've seen, because some of this has just been evolving fairly recently, but that's the genesis of that. It's a very important thing for the town to get in front of. And it should be the planning board.
Thank you, Judy. I just want to say, as a member of the planning board, I'd like to start off on this one, because I can't tell you how I support all three of these. Anybody who's looked at our bylaws know how convoluted they are in places. And first of all, they should be easy for the public to understand. They should also be easy for developers and the planning board members to understand without all of the questions that come up. So I think at the end, we probably need to rewrite our zoning bylaws totally, but let's start off with an audit, and as Judy said, you have to start off with a stable place before you do make any changes. So I can't say enough how much I support that one. Reinstating the position of town planner. When that position went away, it was said, well, the planning board would hire consultants for individual projects. That could never work. I don't, first of all, hiring a consultant for a one-time project who may not even know much about the town, having that long-range plan. So I first want to say that I think Patrick does a lot of this, and we thank him for that. But the town absolutely needs a town planner, and we need it more than ever for how things are happening so quickly. And we need to be on top of things. That gets into the third one. So I just want to say, Judy, I totally support this. I hope that that our committee comes out with this. And again, I don't want to take away from the work and the support that Patrick gives, because Patrick gives an immense amount of support to the planning board, crossing over from economic development to actually doing some planning like things. So excuse me for taking that prerogative, but I really want to thank, I really think these are things that have to happen. Thank you. So we'll go with Andrew this now. Start with Andrew.
Well, Philip, I mean, I really do appreciate you giving your take as a planning board member. I don't want to put it on the spot, but I really want to defer to the planning board members when we talk about land use regulation and zoning. If Katie would, I'd love to hear her thoughts, because I know we're going in a certain order, but the people who have expertise, I kind of want to hear them first, and then we can kind of talk through the other issues, the ideas I have.
Yeah, no, I think Katie, that's fair. And I apologize for not calling on you second. So Katie.
No problem. So I don't have an issue with any of these. I do feel that, again, just like I said before with the zoning bylaw, if we rewrite it, I don't think we should just rewrite another town's. I think it really has to fit in for Walpole. I think when it comes to the planners, since I've been on the planning board, I don't know if we've been through 2 or 3. And I'll be honest and say, I don't feel any of them really gave a whole lot of benefit. I think that we could use a planner. I think it would be great, but someone who's going to actually give us, help, assistance, guide us, and, go through the projects that come along, really go through them and tell us what they think and why they think it. So I think it's important that we hire the right person if we're going to hire a planner. Okay. And finally, I think number 3 is vital, not just to planning. I think the entire town is impacted by that.
Yeah.
I think that the planning board should play a part in that. And I think that it could be a great benefit to the town, or it could be a complete disaster for our town. So I think it's really important that we are involved in the Cedar Junction and what happens to it.
Yeah.
Because just as Judy said, the state's not going to be looking out for our best interests. It's very important that we do. So I think that one right there, I mean, that flashes all sorts of alarms at me. I think it's really important.
But it could be an opportunity. That's if we.
It could be. No, it could be a great benefit,
Yeah.
or it could be an absolute disaster. So that's why I think that's super important that we stay on top of that one. Actually not on top of it, ahead of it.
Okay, so Andrew.
Just to pick up where Katie left off, completely agree. I really think 4.3, this third recommendation, is really critical. So full agreement there. But I'm going to make some comments now about 4.1 and 4.2 that are maybe a little detailed because I think these apply to, we're going to talk about the housing section later. They also apply to the economic development section we already talked about. So just bear with me one second. So for 4.1 and 4.2, like Phil said, I agree with everything Phil said. I think these are good recommendations. However, here's my point. Zoning reform is not an end unto itself, but it is a means to better housing outcomes. It's a means to better economic development outcomes. And I feel like 4.1 and 4.2 are kind of the work before the real work. And I know, Judy, you're right to sequence it this way. I totally get why we need to do the audit to clean up the existing bylaws before we want to change or adapt it. I totally get it. So 4.1 makes sense. Having the staff capacity, for all Patrick does, I defer to you, Judy. I defer to you, Philip. If we need a town planner, it makes sense to do 4.2. But then there's a kind of bigger issue of like, well, what is zoning reform that doesn't just, look at dimensional tables and kind of read the zoning book to people, but it actually kind of has a vision for the long-term plan of the town. And I think, so here's what I think is missing. I think there's a recommendation missing here, which is that Walpole needs more housing choices, and we need to change our zoning bylaws, specifically the overly strict land use regulations in our bylaws to enable more housing choices. So here's how I think of it. We have firefighters that we need to hire, and the fire chief is struggling to hire them. We have teachers, we have people who are part of the workforce and the commutable distance of the town. Maybe they grew up in town. Maybe they're Walpole High graduates, and they can't afford housing in this town. We don't have enough housing choices for aging baby boomers who are retiring and downsizing and want a different type of housing choice. Millennials who are, having maybe fewer kids, and with land being so expensive in Walpole, we are a part of a very job-rich metro area. But those starter homes are just not there for people who have smaller families and want maybe a smaller lot. So here's my point. With land use in this section, whether it's 4.4, it's a recommendation later, but after we do the audit, after we clean up the zoning bylaws, I think if we reform these excessively strict land use regulations, we'd have more housing choices. So think of like a single family house with an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, or think of a duplex, or, think of what I call the missing middle housing. This is housing that's 2 units to 6 units. So often our town is either single family homes or a big 40B project, or single family homes and the 2 big market rate apartments complexes downtown. There's no in between, this missing middle. And so zoning has a huge tool. It's a huge tool to enable not just the planning board to, read dimensional regulations, but change the zoning so that it is enabling more housing choice. And 2, it's simple, that the zoning bylaws are clear and it's unbiased. And so what that means to me is allow a greater variety of structures that are permitted as of right or by right, and it does not require discretionary approval. And what I mean by that is, like I said, the single family plus ADU, the duplex, have the ability, because the alternative is not to just keep Walpole the same. That's not an option, to just keep Walpole the same, because look at the 40Bs that are going in, and that may be still coming, because like I said earlier in this meeting, we're no longer in safe harbor, so we're exposed to 40Bs. So the choice is not keep Walpole the same or more density. The density's coming. It's how we choose it. Do we want it to be big 40Bs, or do we want it to be missing middle housing? And to do that, we need to look at our zoning bylaws, not just to audit them, to clean them up, not just to hire a town planner, but we need to allow for more housing choice. For example, by lowering minimum lot sizes, making setback requirements less long as they are today, allow for, single family starter homes that are on a 1/4 acre. So there's an incredible tool here. It's zoning reform, it's land use. And so what I would say to Judy and everyone, and to Tyler, I really, I thank you for your work. This is good, 3 good recommendations, Tyler and Judy, but we need a 4th one, which is change our dimensional regulations to allow for a greater variety of housing choices.
And I just want to say, I just agree with everything Angela said. I was looking at some of those things under housing, and as I said, I think that this is just the start, because I think the idea of fixing the existing ones is a good starting point before we go changing things, but rewriting, and we do need to address housing and all the things that Angela said and some of these things actually we talked about at the planning board at our last meeting that Patrick has suggested. But definitely we need to address the fact that we don't have enough housing that meets all needs. We don't have enough affordable housing. As Andrew said, the housing in the middle. And there's lots of things that we can do by right that can help that. And so we should be doing those. Now, so Judy, you're going to probably have those things in this section of the housing section.
Yeah, I'm trying not to have the land use section turn into a housing section, because I think there's more involved in a land use rewrite, zoning rewrite than the housing policy. So I mean, although yes, these things are kind of all integrated, I got to tell you, if you never dealt with accessory dwellings or missing middle or inclusionary zoning, you need this bylaw cleaned up. And that's the point of this section.
Yeah, so will you be putting in, so do you want a list of things we want? I mean,
Well, we're looking for direction from you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what Andrew was saying, and I think I don't know if there's a strong consensus, but certainly that is something we absolutely need. I mean, the housing partnership worked on the inclusionary zoning bylaw. That you covered that in the housing section, but that's just the beginning of really reforming our bylaw, housing bylaws.
But it's also, guys, I mean, it's not just the reforming the zoning, it's where.
Right,
And,
yes. Well,
and there are areas of town where it probably makes sense to talk about more types of housing, and there are areas where you shouldn't.
Yes, but
And
maybe
I
that's
think
a whole other.
that where is something that you're all going to have to wrestle with as a community, because there's a lot of disagreement about this.
But maybe that's a discussion for just a single discussion. Just again, I'm looking to.
It is.
That we should have a meeting just to discuss that, because that is one of the most, I think, contentious issues, or one that may be a lot of different opinions.
Well, you wouldn't be the only town.
No, but I'm just trying to have a process that moves forward. Again,
Right.
I know, for example, we have the other 5 or six goals, right?
Yeah, and I think we do need to focus on those tonight. Okay,
So again, I don't want to take away from, I mean, all the things that Andrew said are things that have been talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And they need to be put in a place where they're actually going to be actionable, or they can be brought before the appropriate committees or the appropriate process to get them enacted. So that would be
I don't disagree with that, but that direction is going to come from you folks.
yes, but that's why but maybe we need to have maybe we need to have a committee meeting on just housing.
It probably is. I wouldn't.
Because it's going to be more than what's going to be in, I mean, all of these are just example things. And where you were looking for some direction by giving us examples, and then you're going to come forward with more complete ones, but we can be giving you what we want as well.
Right.
So maybe I'm just going to, to speak to the committee, maybe we need to have a meeting just on housing. Just a thought.
It'd be a good idea.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew. Janet?
Okay, I definitely think this should be the housing. What Andrew and Phil have been suggesting needs to be discussed in a different meeting than this one. We're just going over these now. I also just have a question. Does anyone know why we do not have a planner? Did anybody address that? Any of my town people?
I do.
Why? John?
If you interview, there was, I believe the number is 15 planners over the last 20 years. And if you interview the planners that left, they say that they can't really work with certain members of the planning board. And that they're not allowed, they can't, people don't accept their planning expertise. People have their own ideas on the planning board. And I
So
think
if I could just chime in, so.
Well, let me finish, please. So we evolved the position to community development
Yes.
for Ms. Mercandetti, and tried to have the reporting lines to the town administrator. That was his idea, basically, so that he didn't have the turnover, and include the support of to the planning board. But part of it could be that the expertise of the people who were the planners wasn't up to the standards of the planning board. This goes back years ago, or that just they were strong-minded planning board members that really didn't want the expertise, the decisions of a planner who knew the state laws and regulations. And I think it's not a reflection on the current planning board, but a certain member has mentioned that the planning board lost 24 cases in a row when people have felt they weren't getting, the right approvals from the planning board. And that being the case, that would say there's some kind of difference between the planning ideas of the town and what the state laws are. And that's probably a frustration for someone who's trying to be within the legal boundaries of being a planner and do what he was taught, was the right types of activities.
I think to move this, if you don't mind, John, just going to interrupt you. I think to move this forward, though, I think that might be another discussion. Maybe, I wasn't involved in earlier years, but I think we need to go.
Yeah.
We need to look at what Judy's recommending going forward. And,
Well, let me just finish my statement, then I'll be off your plate.
Yeah.
As far as this, number one, very quickly, I would say that your idea was correct, Phil. You should, first of all, have your goals of what you really want to improve with your zoning, far as housing, far as business development, and then have a consultant come and redesign the zoning bylaws for what your goals are, not to have a consultant get you the boilerplate, latest, up-to-date, consultant type zoning laws, and then try to jury rig back into that the things that you, like Katie says, that are unique and idiosyncratic to the people of Walpole and what kind of planning and what kind of development they want. So I think absolutely you should have your decisions first about what direction you're going in these major aspects of planning, then have the zoning guy come in and write regulations for you instead of doing it the other way. As far as the position on planner, I think Patrick's an excellent planner, finally. And he doesn't have that title. So I don't know if that's perplexing to him or not, but it's not my business. Theoretically, I would just say this. If I was on the planning board, I want a good engineer and I want a peer reviewer and an attorney. Those are the people that help you make your decisions, not a jack of all trades planner. And that's part of the problem, is there's diversity, there's specialist expertise to planning board to really help the planning board members do what they were supposed to be doing. And I would say the money would be better spent having taking better advantage of the peer review and of the consultant planner, a strong engineer and legal, so you know legally what your boundaries are. And I think that would help you a lot more than having another person who's a planner who's expected to wear 5 hats and probably can't meet your expectations on most of them. So that would be it. I think that would be my input.
Can I please super quickly respond to
Okay.
Janet? So Janet, I can speak to the last planner. I was fairly new and I felt I had really no help, no guidance. So when he was let go, the position was reworked to say, there's probably a better word for that, Pat, but Pat's job description is different. He is not a planner for Walpole. He does a gazillion things and he helps us greatly, but he does not report to planning board. He's not a planner. So as Phil said previously, it was said we would use consultant as needed. We haven't used a consultant like in that manner to review an entire project that I can remember, Phil. No. So that being said, we do not have a planner. We haven't had a planner for some time. Pat's great. Pat assists with things, but the job description was reworked. So to answer your question, I think that answers it.
Okay,
And
so
I do
you
want to
think
just go
we
back.
do need a
Oh.
planner?
What, Janet?
Is this board in agreement that we do need a planner? Or have they not proven their worth, except for Pat?
Which, are you talking about the planning board or are you talking about our committee?
No, I'm talking about the suggestion here that we need a planner.
Yeah, so we need just to continue going through the rest of the members of the committee to see what they think.
Okay. That's all I have to say. The rest of them are fine.
So I think, Katie, you're saying you would like to see a planner.
I would like to see a planner if they can provide us with what we need.
Mhm.
And I
We
would hope
haven't
that would be
seen
a
that.
given, that hopefully,
Since I've been there, I haven't, I shouldn't say we, I can only speak for myself. Since I've been there, I haven't seen that.
okay. And Janet, why don't we go back to you? Are you good? Well, what are the three things?
Yeah, I think they're all important.
Okay, thank you. And Jen,
I think that they're all, I agree with all three. I would say, I think, I like that it's a constant refrain that we need to use these resources and be more proactive than reactive. We get in trouble because we're constantly reacting, and that's what ends up costing us more. I would say I'd be in favor of a town planner, but we have to make sure that the salary we are offering for these positions is an attractive one that will get
Right.
top quality candidates.
Right.
And
Thank you.
because it's now an hour and 40 minutes and we're only halfway through number 4, I have no further comments.
Yeah.
okay. Are people good with what the process? I feel it's important to get everyone's comments but how are people feeling about the process?
I think that the process is great. However, I think this is a long meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it is very important. So all I
Maybe
can
we
do is
needed
just,
2.
well,
Perhaps 2 would have been better than just 1.
I agree that we probably should tackle this in 2 meetings.
do you want to, okay, so that probably makes good sense. So why don't we finish number 5? We're halfway through that way. And then we'll work with.
Well,
Pat.
actually, I'd like to suggest that we not do that because we have Martha on tonight.
Okay,
And I would like to make sure that we hear from, and also transportation. I think we should jump to those,
okay,
especially because housing and climate change and so forth are likely to be a bit controversial.
yeah,
Perhaps it would be best if we talked about transportation and house and historic while we have them with us.
okay,
Tyler,
so
I'm
we'll do
not trying to
we'll do
displace
those
you, but-
two. That makes good sense. But let me just finish with the land use very quickly, since we started it. Can we do that? Just so we. So, Mike?
So I think they all look great. I also appreciate everybody's comments that knows about this stuff way more than I do. So I'll defer to those folks. But I think they look great.
Okay, thank you. And okay, we heard from, so Dean?
Oh, Dean said he has internet issues. He doesn't have any comments.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Oops, okay, yeah, just saw that. Okay, and Ashley?
So I think that, this is setting the goals for the next 10, 20 years, right? And I think that really one way to think about it is that the goal should be to assess the capacity of the planning department and build it out to what the town's need is. So I don't know that saying, oh, we need to reinstate the position of the town planner is what the goal should be. The goal, I think, should be to assess the capacity and determine whether or not it's built to serve the roles that the town wants that department to serve. And that could look different in 5 years or 10 years.
Okay, any other comments, or what do you think of the other 2?
The other 2 are great. Yeah.
Okay. And then Carrie?
No comments from me. We'll keep it moving.
Okay. So it sounds like one thing, Judy, is having maybe more between here and housing, having more concrete bylaw changes, not just doing the audit. I mean, I think you.
Well, I think the audit-
I'm not saying that you're not saying do that, but just that's one feedback probably.
Right. The audit is really in the land use section, that more topic things probably belong in the other sections of the plan, and together they all sort of inform what land use policy becomes. I'm
Yeah.
not married to that, but that was intentional.
Yeah, no, and I think it makes sense, so. So why don't we move to, so we're gonna do historic preservation and transportation.
Yeah.
So let's go to goal 7, which is transportation and circulation.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn to you on this to answer. You can, this came from your firm, so I'm going to bump this to you.
Sounds good.
How's that,
Can everyone
how's
hear
that
me?
for passing the ball? Oh
Works. Can you hear me okay?
yeah, we can hear you. It's fine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I'll just give a bit of a description of the 3 kind of key ideas we discussed here, and then open it up. So one key theme that we heard a lot was walkability. We heard that in the survey, we heard that in our public meeting, just that seemed to be a big theme. So these recommendations touch on that a lot. Downtown, there's a lot of pride in downtown and Walpole. People think about it a lot, so we also touch on that. So the first key theme that we heard is improving pedestrian and bicycle facilities in downtown Walpole for people of all ages and abilities. There's been recommendations that have come out of this process, out of previous processes, talking about kind of making downtown an area where people want to hang out, want to go with their families, socialize, eat, etc. And so kind of ensuring that it's accessible, ensuring that the sidewalks are wide enough, kind of just making sure that that area is walkable and friendly for people to come and be. So that was one kind of key theme we heard during this process, is just the importance of downtown in the center of making things walkable, connections to commuter rail, etc. Another theme we heard was just kind of gaps across the town in sidewalk connectivity, making sure that the town knows where the issues are and is prioritizing them adequately. So a recommendation that came out was developing a townwide pedestrian and bicycle plan. This is thinking about where are the most important places to be prioritizing bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvements. And then finally, this is kind of our catch-all, do-it-all recommendation, but improving safety, reducing congestion through roadway maintenance and targeted improvements. This, we talk about funding mechanisms for how you can do that. The state has a lot of different programs, like the Complete Streets program, which Walpole participates in, as well as the Shared Streets program during COVID, DCR Mass Trails program for doing kind of trail improvements. So kind of thinking about how the town can harness those, as well as using the pavement management program that the town already has, funding it more to improve sidewalk maintenance, as well as pavement, stuff like that. So I think is that a good kind of summary? Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'll turn it over to Phil to go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much, Anna, for joining us. So Andrew and Ashley have responded by text or by the chat that they're good with all 3. So I'm gonna go through and she'll ask you. So if you agree with all 3, just say so. But if you have other questions, or please do enter them. So Janet, we'll start with you.
I agree with all 3.
Okay, John.
Yeah, quickly. It's a little bit downtown centric. I think that pedestrians doing jogging or bicycling tend more to want to be going around New Pond or going up to try to get to Adams Farm or to go to some outlier place. Not, I understand you want to have a lot of walking around the downtown, but I would just say from the workshops, the vast majority of people do not want the downtown further developed with any more high rises or mass housings. So they're not looking to have this become the new Dorchesters or whatever.
John, I don't know why you say you don't, but
the people don't want all the concentration and high density downtown. They're very upset about what's already been done.
Well, I think that's your opinion. I'm not sure. I don't.
Transportation based on, because there's a railroad station there, we should have more housing and more people and more walking around and focus transportation around there. I'm saying for for pedestrian bicycle plan, that type of thing, that's a good idea. And well, the jogging plans include the rest of the town. That's really, I said it's a little bit CBD centric or downtown centric, the discussion here. That's my comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess just to touch on that, the town pedestrian and bike plan that we're suggesting would kind of be a more full look at the whole town. And I do think that one thing that we've heard here is this connection to recreational facilities as well.
Yeah.
So thinking about making sure that people can access those. So that's heard as well.
No, thank you, John. And by the way, if anybody wants to just respond by text to say that you agree with everything, that's valid. That we, Jen?
I agree with all three. I would just also add that outside of the downtown district, can we also make sure that we include the route of the 34E bus? We have a lot of people that come to Walpole and take public transportation, and they go to like the Walpole Mall, and there's not great sidewalks, there's no bus shelters, there's things. So just make sure we're looking at that area as well.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. And Dean and Ashley just said they agree. Dean agrees with all three, and Ashley was second on the 34 bus. So, Katie?
I'm all set with these. I think they're good.
Okay, and Dean was all set, and Carrie.
I agree with all three. I think sidewalks and walkability is something we heard over and over again. I'm happy to see it emphasized so much. I continue to hear about it in the community. To John's point, I think I would emphasize walkability and greater access around our public school buildings as well. That's a real issue in town. Many parents can't safely send their kids to walk or bike to school because there are no sidewalks or paths. And that's it.
Thank you. And I would just, I agree with all three. The only thing I would add would be the safety. I think that there's a lot of our intersections which are very dangerous for pedestrians crossing. I think we need to do a lot better. Having had 3 incidents in myself on crossing, and not just in the downtown area. I think it's throughout the town where there are sidewalks. So support the 3 of these, and then pedestrian safety. Are we good with that? Anyone else? So
Yeah,
we're going to go. Well,
I guess, can I just do a quick summary? So I heard
yes.
connections to recreation, public space, connections to schools, connections to the 34E, thinking kind of more town-wide, safety at crossings. We saw snow removal. So kind of just trying to like incorporate all of these different aspects of walkability and what does that mean? But kind of summing up some of that, that was great. Yeah, thank you.
I think so. Yeah, no, and I
Awesome.
think you got it. And again, thank you for attending our meeting too, and being here. And so the last one we're going to do today is historic preservation.
Right.
Number 9.
Martha, you're on.
Yes, hello, thank you.
And Martha, thank you for being here too.
Of course, it's my pleasure, thank you. So Walpole, obviously, all the work that's been done, the outreach, the engagement, history and culture are very important in the town. People feel very strongly about them and about the need to preserve history, make arts more vibrant and alive and much more part of the fabric of the town. One of the problems that Walpole has is capacity. And so just the ability to get volunteers together to kind of make preservation efforts happen, make arts programming happen. And that's so true for towns across the Commonwealth. So you're not alone. So I think, and this is something that's happening in the preservation field in general, that preservation efforts are becoming much more intertwined with other issues facing towns, such as housing, such as natural resource protection, economic development, and just overall socialization. And so I think the more that we can think of preservation in that way, I think your efforts to preserve the historic resources you have and to invigorate the arts community will be a lot more successful. So these are the three that I've outlined here are ways to get that town to start thinking about that. One of them is the possibility of doing a long-term preservation plan. And I heard you earlier talking about more planning documents and not such a great something that people necessarily support. But this is a tool that can really help you get on your feet. It can help you understand what you have that's historic, what the priorities are for people in the town, what they really want to see preserved, and also help develop the tools for achieving preservation. And again, that can cross into a lot of other issues facing the town. Housing is one that comes to mind. So that would be one. The other way to really get people interested in history, obviously, is to get people interested when they're young. I know there are school curricula that deal with history, but making preservation and historic resources available and something that's accessible to people of all ages is important. So there are a number of programming opportunities for doing that. And then finally, I think that there's a great opportunity to foster much greater arts community, a supportive arts community, both for artists to display their work, but also to live and work in the town. And again, that would go along with housing as well and economic development. So that's a snapshot, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and thank you very much, Martha. So Andrew and Dean are deferring to Jen. So I'm going to start off with Jen.
Great. Even though I've been counting down, it's taking too long. I do have a few comments. I agree with all these. I do think so. I think two will help us. We are another committee where we are very much reactive as opposed to proactive because we have extremely limited resources. Contrary to what town administrator says, we submit modest budgets and we get zero budgeted multiple years in a row. So we have nothing to dedicate to doing this. So we would have to have a commitment from the town to put resources into this. I really applaud one because I wanted people to learn. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it's actually going to prevent us from losing any of our historic buildings. Case in point for the last building we just lost was 38 Peach Street. It was actually Mr. Wild, who loved the history of that house, his neighbor who bought it and tore it down and is now building 5 mansions on that, McMansions on that property. But I do think it's still a worthwhile thing for us to make sure that people know about Walpole history, and maybe, just maybe, somebody's who's in a house will think about it before they sell it. But I'm not sure how much it's really going to impact our ability to save historic buildings here in Walpole.
Thank you, Jen. So you're good with all three of them. So Janet?
I'm good with all three.
And John?
John, I think you're on mute.
I think
I'm
John?
good. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. And Mike's good with all three, but he wants to. He's good with the suggestion about collaborating one of the music schools in Boston, maybe arts as well, to bring more classes and opportunities to Walpole. I think that's actually very a good suggestion. And Katie?
I'm good with all three. I think it's important.
Yeah, and I'm also good with all three. And I just want to mention two things. One is the Historical Society has been putting up signs at each of the water privileges, which I think is a really great thing to see our history being out there so people can walk and see it. I think it'd be good to see a lot more of that. But again, I think as Jen was saying, all these things require resources, so we need to fund, putting up preserving our history and also in publicizing our history and informing people about our history. And the other thing, the Walpole's anniversary is coming up for our town. So this is like a huge opportunity. We should really be mobilizing. I know we have a committee working on that. But this is an opportunity maybe to really make our history in that limelight, educate people, and maybe get a lot more support for preserving buildings. Certainly, starting with what are we going to do with the old town hall? Here's a building that's been it's one of our most visible buildings. It represents the town in so many ways, and yet we really don't have a plan right now.
Phil, just to double back on that, the 300th anniversary committee, those signs are a result of, Jen, correct me on this, it's Katie Burtwell, right? She's the one spearheading that. The signage that you'll see around town, they are working on all sorts of historical aspects to tie in with the 300th. So they're doing a great job and they've started already.
It's Betsy Dyer from the Historical Society.
Betsy Dyer.
She's really leading it. And then Katie and I are doing it, and John Anderson as well. So we have this whole vision. We're going to do a historical house plaque program again. We are thinking of things that we're going to do to highlight its history, but it's really Betsy Dyer who's been doing a lot.
And there's some videos too, if I'm not mistaken. They're doing a great job and they're already working hard on it. So kudos to them all.
Absolutely, I want to applaud that because when I saw those signs, I was really very pleased, and it's good to see that. So thanks to all those who are working on that. Any other comments on this subject then?
Just one. This is Ashley.
Ashley.
Sorry I know
No.
everyone wants to go to bed. Do we want to consider exploring like zoning bonuses or incentives for adaptive reuse of historic buildings?
That could be good.
Martha, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think there are an array of preservation tools of that type. If, preserving historic buildings is really critical, and it sounds to me like it is, and I know that it is from meeting with you and reading all the survey results. There are a number of preservation tools that can be explored, and that's something that the preservation plan would do. And Judy can probably talk about this more authoritatively than I can, because she's working on a plan for the city of Northampton right now, which is where I live. And so yes, I mean, and again, in my preface, I think preservation is most effective when it's integrated with other issues facing the community, like housing, like economic development, like natural resource protection. And so this is a perfect example of it, how providing incentives for developers who may want to, tear down a historic building, providing some type of an incentive, a bonus, to help save it is one way of doing that. So that certainly could be explored.
Yeah, it sounds like those kind of things would give a lot more options for preserving buildings that otherwise the Historic Commission really has very little to that they have at their hands to do.
Yeah.
So Martha, thank you very much.
Welcome.
If everyone else is good on this, so we have left. We have climate change, housing, municipal facilities and services, and community health, if I have that right. So we will have a second meeting to do that. And I'll work with Patrick and Judy to see where we could schedule that.
Question.
Andrew?
Philip, it says in our agenda that the next meeting's August 23rd. Is that when we'll take this up?
Well,
I would hope.
Judy, you want to speak about that?
Yeah, I would hope that maybe you could get to it sooner than that, because we're trying to keep this as close to on schedule as we can. So, I understand that it is summertime and people take vacations, which complicates trying to schedule meetings. I'm not even sure right now, given the number of meetings we already have on our calendar, whether we can attend another one before August, whatever. But there's no reason why you guys can't meet to go through the rest of these. I mean, you have the explanation of these different strategies. And I think you just have to bat them around and decide what you want to include and what you don't. But
And we
I
can
mean, if
give
you
you the-
can, I
we
would
can-
not wait till the end of August, but that's
Yeah,
up
we
to
can
you.
get, and we can give you that input. If you're not there, Judy, we can,
Yeah, I mean, these are
Yeah.
all big policy questions, you know,
Yeah.
more than anything. And I think the policy direction of this plan needs to come from the committee and obviously ultimately the planning board. So I think you have what you need to debate these, and I would just encourage you to think about getting a date sooner than later to do that.
yeah.
So
Maybe we can try to do that in the next week or two, Patrick.
So why don't we talk, we can try to circulate some dates and
Yeah.
maybe treat it as a doodle poll. And then from there, and Judy, like if you or your team are unable to make it, we just have the recording of the meeting available for your team to utilize.
Judy, do you need us to, once we kind of go through, do we vote on this and say, okay, yes, we're voting on these goals?
You mean the recommendations?
Yes.
I mean, it would be good to get a vote, yeah, so that we kind of know which of these really are staying, and that's gonna then guide us to what else we're going to put in the recommendations for each element. So, I mean, yeah, a vote would be good. The problem with sort of consensus is people don't necessarily remember exactly what they said or agreed to, and, I think for your own sake, you're gonna want votes on record.
So
But, whether you vote on these or the larger set is really, I think, up to you guys.
Yeah, and I thought what you were planning on doing is giving us a larger set based
Well, we
on,
are.
based on
are.
our response here.
That's why I'm hoping that you can meet before the end of August to go through the rest of these, because
And my takeaway from this is that most people agreed with the ones that you presented, although there were some, I think, some pretty good suggestions on how you
yeah.
might change those.
yeah,
But I thought,
I agree. They were very helpful.
I thought that, that there's no one saying we don't want to change zoning, or no one was saying that, we don't want to make recreation a priority or something. So I think that's what but at the end of the day, our committee will be the one to vote on the recommendations.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I just would like to get some direction sooner than later, so I know. I mean, I think we have some helpful direction tonight, but obviously from our point of view, we don't want to build out a much larger set of recommendations and then come back and find out, oh, we didn't really mean this or that or something else. So
But did you get what you needed for the ones that we covered today?
I think tonight was helpful.
Yeah, do you need more from us on those? Are you looking for us to?
No,
give
no,
you-
I don't. I'm not at this time. No, I think we need to get to the others because those are the ones where there's probably going to need to be some serious discussion.
Because I think we could also recommend, different items that we would like to see. But I think right now we're waiting for you to give us something to look at on all these.
Well, we're
It's-
trying to respond to, the surveys,
Yeah,
the research we did, the comments that you gave us on the draft inventories, which led us to do some more research,
And you're gonna give us
we're
that
responding to
input
a
back.
variety of different sources, sources of information here. And then, ultimately, as planners, we have to kind of distill all of this through, what are the appropriate practices in the field, and what is planning about, and who is it for? So, there's some planning principles at play here as well. That would be in play just because it's a plan, and we're planners and we're writing a plan. So there are things that we are going to suggest in here that we think are important. And we're going to need direction. I mean, the whole idea in housing around, equitable choice. Well, that's something that planners care deeply about because we know what happens when there's not an equitable choice. We know what the impact of that is on people, but it's your town and we need direction from you.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to do that, but we will give you more direction on the housing.
That's fine. That's good.
And Patrick, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, before our regularly scheduled meeting, I think we have 3 weeks, not counting trying to plan for a meeting this week. I can send out some dates during those next 3 weeks as a doodle poll tomorrow morning. The board can let me know what works we can go and try to schedule a meeting, a similar Zoom meeting to go over the last 3 topics. I'll have the recorder for Judy and her team, and then we can at least cover what we were supposed to cover in its entirety tonight and just get that accomplished.
Okay.
And why don't I do want to cover the status update and the schedule, because I think those are very important. So we all know where this is going, and, the schedule. Judy, we talked a little bit about maybe changing the schedule a little bit. So
Well, a little bit. I mean, I'd like to not have this go into next year. So, I think what we want to do right now is get the rest of the recommendations developed, because that's really the heart of the plan. And meanwhile, yes, we will get back to you the inventory and assessment. As I said, it's kind of being condensed right now, so that it's a readable document as opposed to a couple of 100 pages of text. But you've all read it, and we have your comments. And what we need now is policy direction for this plan, and that's what these recommendations are about.
okay, and I want to make sure we're giving you the policy recommendations you're looking for.
Me too. Yeah, we do too. Thank you.
But I want to make sure we're giving it to the forum. So we could give you, so right now, we're just responding to each of your, 3
Right.
3 sample ones. And I'm assuming you're going to give us, what we talked about, you're going to give us a longer
Yep.
set of recommendations.
Right. But we can't get to that till we get through this.
Right. But do you want even more? But we could give you other guidance as well, even after just talking about the 3 that you give us. Like Andrew alluded to, a lot of the housing kinds of things. Or listed.
Well, I
things.
think actually we're very aware of that. I'm not
Okay.
saying that what Andrew said. We do need direction from you, but I think in some ways it might be helpful to the rest of you to sort of take the feedback that you're getting from this team as to all the different sources of information that we've taken in for this project. And let us kind of build out a bigger set of recommendations for you to look at. And then I think we can have a conversation that might be more helpful to you about what are we still missing? Because right now, you're probably going to suggest a bunch of things that are coming anyway.
Okay, so I should make sure you weren't looking for more from us right now.
Not right now, no.
Other than
Ultimately,
this
though, I agree with
process.
Ashley. I agree with Ashley, though, ultimately, I think there should be votes.
Yeah, oh, yes, and I think we are expecting that. Plus, I would expect that we would have would be the main decider of priorities. Right? In other words, at some point, there'll be a list of recommendations, but there has to be some, at least from us, our guidance or our opinion, our recommendations on what those priorities, what the order
Sure.
is.
Absolutely.
So why don't we just go through the schedule, what we're thinking about now, then, Judy?
Well, because we didn't get through all these tonight, I think what we would like to see you do is schedule a meeting before the end of August, so that you can finish a discussion about these. Because what I would like to be able to do is to come back to you for the August meeting with more recommendations for you to digest, and also to clean up some of these based on the discussion that's happened this evening.
Yes, we need to do that before August 23rd.
I'm
That would
asking
be-
you to do that.
That's the
Right.
next meeting.
I understand. I'm saying I think it would be very helpful if you guys can meet to go through the recommendations we didn't get through tonight.
Yeah,
Give us feedback so we can then build out the recommendation section with more content.
yeah. And do that though before August 23rd.
Right.
Right, yeah. And then August 23rd, you would bring back more recommendations.
That would be the plan.
Right.
But I mean, depending upon when you guys can meet, we may not be able to get all that back to you by the 23rd. That's why I'm saying I think it's important to try to schedule another meeting here soon.
Right, yeah, no, and we will try to do that, yeah. We'll try to do that. And as far as the rest of the schedule,
We're still trying to get the complete draft plan done so that it can be the subject of a public discussion in like October. We would
Right.
like to finish this project really, late October to mid-November, somewhere in there. I mean, I haven't talked to Patrick yet about what your town meeting schedule is this fall or any of that. So I don't want to comment on dates tonight. I'm just saying that because I know what it's like when town meeting's going on and people get busy. But our goal is to still try to get this done in all sort of October. I think originally we were thinking about it going to the planning board for public hearing in like early October or late September, but I think it's probably a month to 6 weeks off from that. But we don't want to drag it out longer than that.
Right. And our committee would be voting on all of those recommendations before that draft plan.
I'm assuming you will. I'm assuming that would be
Before
the
the
case.
draft plan comes out, because we would.
I'm
be-
assuming that would be the case,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
certainly you're going to want to make a recommendation to the planning board.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions or comments before we close the meeting? So I want to thank Martha, Tyler, and Anna, and of course Judy for your input and for all the work you're doing on coming up with the recommendations. As always, I want to thank Patrick, who is behind the scenes and always very critical in the workings of our committee and many other things in town. And certainly want to thank Walpole Media TV for recording our meetings so that other people can hear it. So at 9:13, I'll call the meeting adjourned, or I'll have a vote to adjourn the meeting. So I think I'm supposed to do a roll call on all votes. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
So moved by Janet.
Second.
Second by Jen, or by, I'm sorry, Carrie. Yep. So Dean.
Aye.
Ashley,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
Andrew,
Abstain.
Janet,
Aye.
John,
He might have dropped off.
Ron. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Took my wife a while for my eyes to see. Jen.
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
and I. And just a quick question to Andrew. Were you thinking we missed something, Andrew?
No, I get that we want to move on. I just hope Tyler can be there, and we got to get through this. We got to, I mean, I feel Judy's pressure, and it's good. And I'm complimenting Judy. Like, I want us to, we have to move fast. So yeah,
Yeah, we're trying to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the meeting is adjourned at 9:15. I thank you all for attending, and I want to wish you all a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.